You know, when we think about history, it's so easy to just picture the big stuff, right? The huge battles, the famous presidents, all that. But history is also written in the quiet, everyday lives of regular people, the ones who actually built a new world, one family at a time. And today, we're going to dig into one of those exact stories.
So the big question is, how do we even begin to see the past? I mean, how do we connect with a time that feels, well, so far away? How do we make the lives of people from hundreds of years ago feel real?
Well, the way I see it, you do it by zooming way, way in. It's like looking at a huge painting. From far away, it's one big scene, but up close, you see all the individual brushstrokes. We're going to look past the big dates and boring decrees and focus on the people who actually lived it.
And today, the people we're going to meet are Shubael and Hannah Seaver. They lived in 17th century Roxbury, Massachusetts. And get this, their lives spanned almost the entire first century of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. So their story gives us this incredible, intimate peek into the very foundation of America.
Okay, so first, let's set the scene. Picture this. It's the mid-1600s in Roxbury, Massachusetts. The colony is still really, really new. We're talking about a frontier settlement where English families are just starting to put down roots in this brand new, and let's be honest, pretty tough and challenging land.
So take a look at this timeline. You can see their parents getting married, and then boom, Shubael is born around 1640, and Hannah follows in 1647. Now, what's so wild about this is that they were children of that very first wave of settlers. They were part of the first generation to be born and raised entirely in this new world. Think about that. The American continent was the only home they ever knew.
And this really tells you something powerful about what life was like back then. Families were huge, but they were also incredibly fragile. I mean, Shubael had 6 siblings but lost 2 sisters when they were just kids. Hannah's family had 9 children, but one was lost in infancy. This constant threat of child mortality, it was just a part of life. It shaped absolutely everything: their faith, how they relied on their neighbors, their whole view of the world. It wasn't some rare tragedy. It was a heartbreakingly normal part of life.
So, growing up in a world with so much uncertainty, these 2 kids from Roxbury got ready to start their own chapter, to build a life and a legacy together. And here it is. On February 7th, 1668, Shubael, who was 28, and Hannah, who was 21, got married, and their partnership would last for, wait for it, 53 years. Just imagine that. 53 years together, weathering all the changes, the hard work, and all the good and bad that comes with a life lived that long.
So they started a family and had 6 children. But just like in their own childhoods, loss was never far away. Their first son, Robert, just disappears from the records. He almost certainly died as a child. But their other kids survived and built their own lives. Joseph, the eldest son and main heir, Abigail, who married a shoemaker, Shubael Jr., who followed in his dad's footsteps as a wheelwright, and then there's their daughter, Hannah. Check this out. She didn't get married until she was 50 years old. That's super unusual, and it almost definitely means she was the one who stayed home to take care of her parents as they got older. All right, so how did Shubael provide for this big family? Well, here's something interesting. Unlike most of his neighbors, he wasn't a farmer. Nope, he was a skilled craftsman, and his trade was absolutely essential to the colonial economy.
He was a wheelwright. Okay, so what is that exactly? In a time with 0 cars and nothing but rough, bumpy roads, wheelwrights were basically the mechanical engineers of their day. They built and fixed the wooden wheels that kept everything moving. We're talking farm carts, merchant wagons, the whole shebang. It was a tough job, but somebody had to do it, and it was absolutely vital.
And this is so cool. This is a direct quote from the Roxbury town records in 1661. It says the town paid 16 shillings for wheels to Shubael Seaver. This tells us that by the time he was just 21, Shubael was already a pro, getting paid by the town for his work. And you gotta love the old-timey spelling, right? W-H-E-L-S for wheels, and Shubael for his name. It just pulls you right back into that time. In fact, his work was so important that the town of Roxbury literally invested in his business. Look at this timeline. In 1663, they give him land for his first shop. Then in 75, a bigger plot. By 1682, they grant him the land absolutely. This wasn't just some favor. It was a strategic move by the town. They knew their community's economy depended on skilled guys like Shubael. But life for the Seavers wasn't all about work and raising kids. They were also deeply, deeply involved in their community. And in colonial Roxbury, that meant 2 things: church and civic duty.
This table gives us a really great snapshot of what that looked like. First, you see both Hannah and Shubael formally joining the First Church of Roxbury. And you have to understand, the church was the absolute center of Puritan life. It was everything. It was about faith, sure, but it was also about your social standing and even how the town was run. But it went beyond that. Shubael was also doing public works, like getting paid for mending country bridges. And look at this last one. In 1698, he was paid for keeping Sarah Parker. That's basically an early form of social safety net, with the town paying him to provide food and shelter for a woman in need.
And their lives weren't peaceful either. They lived right through King Philip's War, which was this incredibly brutal and devastating conflict between the English colonists and the local Native American tribes. And for the Seavers, this wasn't some headline in a newspaper, it was intensely personal. Shubael's own brother, Nathaniel, was killed in the war. Okay, so this brings us to the final chapter of their story. And it's a pretty remarkable one, both for how long they lived and for the very careful way they planned for their family's future after they were gone.
Okay, to really put this into perspective, let's look at the numbers. The typical life expectancy back then was maybe around 40 years old. Shubael Seaver lived to be 89. Just let that sink in for a second. 89. That is just extraordinary for the time. Can you even imagine the changes he must have seen? He watched Roxbury go from a rough little outpost to a bustling colonial town.
Hannah passed away first, in 1722, at the respectable age of 73. Shubael outlived her by another 8 years. And that meticulous craftsman's nature of his was on full display right up to the very end. He legally finalized the division of his entire estate, his whole life's work, just 15 days before he died. Talk about planning ahead.
And this is how he divided it all up. As was the tradition, the oldest son, Joseph, got what was called a double portion. But here's what's really important. All of his surviving kids, including his 3 daughters, got a share of the land. This was the legacy he and Hannah had built over a lifetime of hard work, and he made sure everyone got a piece of it. But the real story is in the details, right? So Joseph, the eldest, he gets the main house, the mansion. The salt marsh, which was land that Shubael had actually inherited from his father, was passed down to his sons, continuing the family line. And then there's this, which I just think is so touching. All the personal stuff, the furniture, the tools, everything inside the house. All of it went to their daughter Hannah. It's not written down, but it's such a clear thank you for all the years she spent taking care of them. So, what can one family story really tell us about the foundation of a whole nation? Deceivers weren't famous, they weren't powerful, but their story is one of resilience, of skill, of community, and of family. And it's just this powerful reminder that history isn't just something that happens to people. History is something that is built, day by day, through the quiet, steady work of millions of people just like them, all laying down roots and building a future, one family at a time.